The commander's smirk vanished as quickly as it came. His boots stopped mid-stride, eyes locked on the ink. For a moment, the bustling range, the clatter of magazines, the popping of rounds, seemed to fade. That symbol wasn't supposed to exist outside of black files buried in Pentagon vaults. Fewer than 24 operatives in the world had ever earned it, and most of them were ghosts, listed as killed in action. The woman adjusted her rifle calmly, ignoring his stare. "Where did you get that tattoo?" His voice dropped, rough, and edged with disbelief. She didn't flinch, didn't even look at him. Only chambered around with the ease of muscle memory and whispered, "Some things aren't meant for questions, Commander." And then, with one smooth pull of the trigger, she hit a bullseye dead center, not once, but in a flawless grouping that made even seasoned SEALs mutter under their breath. The range is buzzing with nervous chatter. Kids watch wide-eyed as their parents fumble with safety gear. Instructors walk up and down the line, correcting stances and reminding everyone to keep their muzzles pointed downrange. Among them, the woman in jeans and a hoodie hardly draws a glance. She doesn't ask questions, doesn't joke nervously. Like the others, she just waits, quiet and steady. The SEAL commander makes his rounds, larger than life in uniform and presence. His voice carries authority, but when he spots her, his tone shifts to condescension. "Careful, ma'am. That rifle kicks harder than it looks. Wouldn't want you bruising your shoulder." The civilians laugh politely, some glancing at her with pity. She offers no reaction, only adjusts her stance, as though she's heard this 1,000 times before. She raises the weapon with calm precision, and the commander smirks, expecting a clumsy shot. Instead, the sharp crack echoes, and the round punches cleanly through the bullseye. Then another, and another. Perfect grouping. Silence ripples down the line. Civilians stare. Even a few instructors shift uncomfortably. The commander's smirk falters, but it isn't until she pushes her sleeve up to steady her grip that his eyes lock onto the tattoo on her arm. His breath catches, laughter gone. What he sees doesn't belong to a civilian at all. She adjusted the rifle, tugging at the stock to settle it tighter against her shoulder. As she moved, the cuff of her hoodie slid back, just enough to expose the inside of her forearm. The commander's eyes narrowed. At first glance, it looked like ordinary ink, but then recognition hit like a sucker punch. It wasn't a trendy design. It wasn't decorative at all. It was an insignia, sharp and deliberate, etched in black, the mark of a covert unit so secret its members were never officially acknowledged. A unit spoken of in whispers, in classified after-action reports, always followed by blacked-out pages. His smirk vanished. The laughter in his chest turned to stone. For the first time that day, he didn't see a civilian standing at the line. He saw someone who had been where only a handful of operators had ever gone, into missions that officially didn't exist. The woman didn't notice his stare, or maybe she did and simply didn't care. She raised the rifle, fired, and split. The bullseye again, her movements effortless, unshaken. The commander swallowed hard. This was no ordinary training day anymore. The commander couldn't shake what he'd seen. That tattoo didn't belong on a civilian's arm, not here, not anywhere outside the shadows of black files and classified missions. He had seen it once before, years ago, on the inside of a coffin draped in a flag, a closed casket, sealed, not because of what was inside, but because the man inside had never officially existed. Now it was staring back at him from the arm of a woman in jeans and a hoodie. He walked toward her slowly, boots crunching against the gravel, each step pulling. The attention of those nearby, his posture was relaxed, but his eyes burned with a sharpness that made her shift her stance ever so slightly. "Where did you get that tattoo?" His voice was low, stripped of humor now. The woman paused, her rifle still resting across her shoulder. For a beat she didn't look at him. Then, deliberately, she set the weapon on the table and turned. Her eyes were calm, too calm. The kind of calm that came from someone who had stood in worse places than this, places soaked in fire and chaos. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," she said. The commander's jaw tightened. He hated riddles, hated being stonewalled, but something in her tone, soft, measured, almost weary, sent a chill through him. "You think I haven't seen it before?" he pressed. "I know exactly what that mark means, and I know you're not supposed to have it." A faint smile ghosted across her lips. Not arrogance, not defiance, just something sad. "That's exactly why you wouldn't believe me." The nearby chatter of civilians began to fade as the tension settled in the air. A couple of instructors had noticed the exchange. They weren't close enough to hear the words, but they could see the commander's posture, the way his easy swagger had evaporated. Their curiosity sharpened, eyes flicking between the two. The woman adjusted her sleeve, covering the tattoo again, as though sealing the conversation. But the commander wasn't ready to let go. "You don't walk into a family range with that insignia and expect me to ignore it," he said. His voice was steadier now, but beneath it was something colder, an edge of recognition, even respect, he didn't want to admit. Her gaze locked on his, steady as a drawn blade. "Maybe you should, for your own sake." That landed harder than any threat could have. For a moment, the commander forgot where he was. The smell of gunpowder, the chatter of families, the nervous laughter, it all fell away. All he could hear was her voice, laced with quiet finality. Around them, soldiers began to take notice. They weren't used to seeing their commander rattled. His reputation was ironclad, unshakable in combat, unflinching under pressure. Yet here he was, holding himself rigid, his authority quietly challenged by someone who looked like she didn't belong at all. One instructor leaned toward another, whispering, "What's going on? Who is she?" The commander ignored them. His world had shrunk to just her, this ghost in a hoodie. He took another step closer, lowering his tone. "If you've served where I think you have, then why are you here? Why now?" Her answer came without hesitation, "Because sometimes the battlefield follows you home." And with that, she picked up her rifle again, turned back toward the target, and resumed firing as though their conversation had never happened. Each shot cracked like punctuation, a reminder that whatever past she carried, it wasn't finished with her, and now, neither was he. The whispers began almost immediately. By the time the training session ended, the range was buzzing, not with the chatter of families, but with speculation. Soldiers nudged one another, their voices low, carrying fragments of guesses. "Did you see the way the commander looked at her? She's got to be ex-military." "No, not just military. Something deeper." "Did you catch that tattoo?" The symbol spread through the crowd like wildfire. Most didn't recognize it, but a few did, or thought they did. "A covert insignia," they murmured. "Not the kind you earned from standard deployments or ribbons on a uniform. This one belonged to those who lived in the shadows, the kind whose names were never written on plaques or memorial walls." The commander stayed silent, but his silence only fueled the speculation. His men had served under him long enough to know when he'd been rattled. And tonight, he had been. Later, as the crowd thinned and the woman packed her gear into a battered duffel, her story began to take shape in fragments. Not from her lips, she offered nothing, but from what others pieced together. The way she moved with her weapon, effortless, muscle memory baked in from years of training, the faint scars across her knuckles, too deliberate to be accidents. And that tattoo, the one she never should have had. Someone whispered she had been part of a team that didn't exist, a Black Ops program so secret that even most admirals pretended ignorance, a unit tasked with missions too dangerous, too deniable for anyone else. But then came the darker rumor. that she had walked away. That on one mission, no one agreed. Where Afghanistan, maybe Syria, everything had gone wrong. Her team hadn't made it back. She had. Barely. And when she returned, she didn't stay. She disappeared, vanishing into civilian life like smoke in the wind. No medals, no recognition, just silence. Now she was here, standing on a family range, as if trying to disappear again. But ghosts didn't stay buried forever. The commander knew it. She knew it. And the whispers ensured that soon everyone else would too. The commander couldn't let it go. The whispers, the tattoo, the way she carried herself, it all gnawed at him. He wasn't a man who dealt in rumors. He needed proof. When the last of the civilians began packing up, he stepped forward, voice sharp enough to cut through the noise. "Ma'am," he said, loud enough for his men to hear, "how about a little demonstration? A live fire accuracy test, nothing complicated, just you, me, and the range." The woman glanced at him, reading the challenge in his eyes. Around them, the SEALs straightened, eager for the show. Some smirked, expecting her to fold. Others, remembering her earlier shots, weren't so sure. She sighed softly, almost as if bored, then stepped forward. "Fine. Your rules." The commander barked orders. Targets were set farther down range, smaller, harder to hit. Wind picked up, making the shots even trickier. He loaded his weapon, confident. Years of combat, countless missions. He wasn't about to be embarrassed by a civilian, tattoo or not. He fired first. 5 shots, clean, precise. Each one punched near the bullseye, a display that drew nods of approval. He lowered his rifle, turning toward her with the faintest smirk returning to his face. Her turn. She lifted the weapon without hesitation. No deep breath, no exaggerated stance, just a fluid, instinctive motion. The crack of gunfire echoed 5 times in rapid succession, almost faster than the eye could track. When the smoke cleared, every round was dead center, not near the bullseye. Through it, a grouping so tight it looked like one hole. The range went silent. The commander stared, jaw tightening. He knew what perfect looked like. This was something beyond. This wasn't training. This was years of survival, muscle memory forged in fire and blood. One of the younger SEALs muttered, "Holy hell!" Before being silenced by a glare, she lowered the rifle, expression unchanged. Satisfied? No one laughed now, no one doubted. The respect in the air was palpable, heavy. Even the commander, pride bruised but unshaken, gave her a curt nod. For the first time that day, the range belonged to her. The range was still hushed, the echo of her perfect shots lingering in the air like a ghost. No one moved at first. Even the chatter of families faded as eyes shifted between the commander and the woman who had just outshot them all. The commander stood rigid, rifle at his side, his jaw working silently. Pride warred with something deeper. Recognition. He had mocked her at the start, written her off as a civilian who didn't belong. But now, staring at the precision carved into those targets, he knew the truth. This woman had walked battlefields. No map acknowledged. He stepped closer, boots crunching against gravel. The men behind him straightened, waiting for his reaction. Instead of anger or a cutting remark, he simply raised his hand, not in formal salute, but in something quieter, rarer, a nod of respect, palm brushing the brim of an invisible hat, informal but deliberate. "You carry the mark," he said under his breath, low enough that only she heard. "That puts you in a company few of us ever meet." She met his gaze without, flinching, then holstered the rifle with the same ease she'd handled it before. No arrogance, no triumph, just quiet finality. "I didn't come here to prove anything," she said softly. "But sometimes people need reminding that uniforms don't make the warrior." Then, as if the moment had never happened, she slung her bag over her shoulder and walked back toward the crowd. The civilians parted unconsciously, sensing something different about her now, though they couldn't name it. By the time anyone thought to ask her name, she was gone, swallowed by the hum of departing families and the late afternoon haze. The commander stayed where he was, eyes on the empty space she'd left behind. Around him, his men whispered, but he silenced them with a glance. This wasn't a story for barracks talk. This was one of those encounters you carried quietly, knowing it mattered more than words could explain, because some warriors don't need a uniform to command respect. Their scars and ink speak louder than any badge.